Hi there, we'll be painting a Hershey's Kiss, which is a chocolate in a wrapper, in a silver foil wrapper, which is 4 colors. We'll be using Payne's Gray, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, and Titanium White. And how I like to start is just with a very simple rough outline sketch. I did that in pencil, and I did that on a panel. A homemade panel with a coating of gesso and then a fine thin wash of acrylic paint in burnt sienna. That gives a nice warm undertone. With that said, we start painting. I start with the darker shapes. Not really exactly as I see them on my reference, but I do it by feeling. I often like to start with a few premixes of colors, so I don't have to care about color mixing too much. However, as we're just painting a reflective surface, we don't have that many pigments on the palette, I decided to go on a more go with the flow type of approach. So I'm mixing here as we go. Initial painting time was 43 minutes actually, but with all the slight mixing parts and getting my brushes and then some paper tissues, it's cut to suit your needs a bit better. Here we'll speed up a little bit because I'm just blocking in the background with a mixture of Payne's Gray and Yellow Ochre. As you see, you get a bit of a variation in warm tones but also very dark tones. Now I want you to pay close attention to what you see there on the left side. You see some indications of the brush. Later on I will smoothen out that paint that it's not that dominant anymore. Meanwhile, I started painting the table on which the kiss is laying. And this is basically burnt sienna, which I'm having not a lot of on my brush, and I'm just scambling it on there. As you can see, it's already starting to look a bit like wood. At certain areas you apply it a bit thicker, at others a bit thinner. Some parts you rub out a bit more, and some parts a little bit less. It gives a bit of a robust feel to this table it's laying on. Nothing too detailed, we just want to get an impression of what we're seeing there. Now we're moving on to the name tag of the candy, which I'm doing with some titanium white, but just a little bit, and I'm rubbing that out. I don't want a thick layer of paint there, I don't want it to distract us too much or the viewer. I just want it to be slightly off-white. Even though the reference has a very bright white there, I choose to keep it a bit more subtle. I'm a bit careful around these edges because I don't want to smear it out too much. What you do get is a nice soft effect as you see that the white goes a bit over the black, and that's fine. That's all fine. And that's also a very nice technique if you want to give an object a bit of a glowing effect as well. Yeah, so keep that one in mind. Now I'm loading up my brush with a bit more paint, and I'm letting my brush, let's call it dance. We're letting it dance on the panel to create nice little random strokes. Remember, this foil is highly reflective, it has a lot of wrinkles on it. We're not gonna paint that ultra realistically in all details, no. We're not hyper-realist painters here, but what we want to achieve is a nice painting of a recognizable object, which from a distance might look like a photo, but as you step in closer, then you see all those gorgeous brush marks. So that's what I'm trying to achieve here as well. Now, it's far from finished, of course, in this stage, but you do see that it's starting to get shape. It's starting to get some depth. We're not there yet, but we're getting there slowly but surely. And I'm using still the same flat brush as I had in the beginning. We're keeping it simple. Simple palette of colors, one brush, no frills. For the lower part of this reflective surface, we also get some reflections from the table on it. So I'm trying to use also a bit of those ochre tones and the burnt sienna tones in this bottom part. And while we're going more towards the middle, as you see there, it's Payne's gray mixed with white. You can see that it's getting a bit more grayish, a bit more cool. So this is also a very nice way to play around with warmer and cooler colors, which also attracts viewers to keep looking just that little bit longer at what you painted. For the lettering can be a pain. Again, here we want to keep it simple. I'm using the same brush, and that's not a blue what you see there, it's just the gray mixed with white. And that gives a blue vibe to it. So try to play around with your colors, mix them, and see how that color appears to you. Because of the warm surrounding colors, in the background you see this gray, but also a bit the brownish tones. Because of those warmer surrounding colors, this actually looks more like a bluish tone. Of course, in the reference picture, it's much more vibrant blue, but again, we choose to not put the essence on the label, but on the foil itself. There's already some paint now on the panel, and I'm regularly cleaning my brush just by wiping it off on a kitchen towel to have fresh paint on it, because otherwise, if I would put down a mark, it would pick up some of the, for example, the dark background in a light paint mixture, and that's something I wouldn't want. So be careful and rub off that brush often. I keep looking at my reference and I make these brush marks approximately where I see it also on the reference. I'm looking at the bigger picture. Where do I see shadows? Is there really a very dominant little crackly line on there? I let myself be inspired by the reference, but I don't let myself be a slave to the reference. You have that artistic freedom to paint what you want and how you want it. And I would not be able to complete this picture or this painting in 45 minutes if I would meticulously paint all the details. So feel free to play around and to just aim for a realistic feel by playing with the darks, with the lights, and with the colors that you're using. Because they're all relative in the end. As I mentioned, I'm using one brush basically the whole time. But that one brush is very versatile. You have, if you hold it flat, you have a big surface, a big flat surface. But if you paint with the edges, then you have a very controlled brush mark. And this is a rather hard brush, so you also can push through the paint a bit. So you can easily rub it out. So whatever brush you might be using, try it one time to just stick with one brush and see what kind of strokes you can do with that. It's nice for your artistic freedom, but also to keep things loose. Because, well, honestly, I'm a big fan of loose paintings. And I have said it before also in other videos, painting loose doesn't mean that you're painting as if you're a loose cannon. No, in contrary. You make deliberate brush strokes. You decide where you need a bit more and where you need to put a bit less paint. You decide where you remove paint. And ultimately you want to see that beautiful brushwork, because if you wanted to have a perfect picture, why not just take a picture? I like the liveliness of the brush strokes. Now here I'm loading it up with some more paint at the bottom side, and we're adding a dark shadow underneath the kiss. So it's no longer floating in space. You see how much that does. Just a simple line to indicate a shadow, a very dark shadow that is. But it adds so much to the depth, but also the weight of the topic that we're painting. So never forget about the shadows. Everything in the world around you has a shadow. From huge buildings to ants. And the edge of this shadow I'm rubbing out slightly to make it more soft. Again, cleaned my brush and now adding some pure white. I always try to leave the pure white to very far in the process because I don't want to meddle around with that too much. And you can simply not go whiter than, well, pure white. Now, this is a highly reflective foil casting off a lot of light. So I'm putting a lot of little dots of white, random strokes again, to give that spontaneous vibe to this piece. And don't forget, you also have other tools, like a palette knife. You can put even more thick paint on your piece like this. That really comes at you. And the beauty of putting thicker lights, so the highly reflective parts, if you put that on thickly, the actual light around you will cast off of that. So it will make those brights even more bright, because they just catch the light as they're sticking out. And you see also good on the left side in the darker background, you see that shine. That's because the natural light is bouncing off all the streaks that I left behind with my brush. So that effect gets stronger if you put paint on thickly. Now, again, I mentioned before, I want that smooth. I'll smoothen it out later because I don't want the attention on that background. Now I'm softening some of the edges, adding minor touches here and there, enhancing the reflection a bit of that table, giving that more 3D-like feel. Now that the piece is getting a bit of shape, it's also good to refine the edges a bit. You know, this is a bit of a shadow part, and I want to blend it slightly in with the background, making it less dominant. The light you see more on the left side, but also frontally from where we're standing. So I'm tweaking that accordingly. But the right side is going a little bit, it's getting a bit softer. It's not completely lost that edge. You can still determine it, but it's much softer. And here I really want contrast. So I'm adding that pure Payne's gray. It's not a black, but it's a very dark gray, which of course I mentioned before, when mixed with white, gets a very nice soft blue tone to it. Just darkening that background here a bit. And here you see how I start with softening those lines. You see already that they're a lot less reflective when you go over it with very soft moves. And you can see that the background becomes a lot less distracting and the focus really gets to what it's all about. And that's the candy in this case, or the wrapper in which the candy is placed. And yes, I'm doing this very carefully because I do not want these blacks to end up on my actual subject. Now the light is also bouncing off on an edge on that table, so it's also reflecting a bit the light, which bounces off again from the object itself. So I'm just putting some whites in there and rubbing it out. I'm making it a bit more softer than on the actual wrapper itself. Now we have a lot of cool tones in this picture, so I'm adding some more burnt sienna, a little bit more thicker strokes to enhance that woodwork of the table, but also to add some more warmth to the piece. So you have a nicer balance between cool and warm colors. Again, making a pleasing effect for anyone who might look at your painting. Just a little bit of paint on your brush goes a long way. And I'm also softening it out again. I want to have it not too dominant. You see a nice contrast with the smooth strokes compared to those rough brush strokes on the subject itself. And again, I urge you to play around also with that palette knife. You see how nice little strokes you can get there just with slightly hovering above your painting. It's a joy to play around like that. If it doesn't work out, then start over, remove that bit of paint. No worries, right? We're all learning. That's also a reason why I like to paint small. It gives me full freedom to play around as much as I want without being too worried about the results. It's different than when you would be working on an expensive big canvas rather than on a small panel. Now you can also forget about it and move on with your life if it doesn't work out, and otherwise that big canvas will be staring at you from the corner in your room for months and months to come. Now that's not really motivating, is it? Here you see me taking a different brush. This is a very soft filbert, just to smoothen out the paint where I really wanted to have a very soft edge. I don't want to push around the paint anymore, so that other brush I was using is more firm, but with this one I can really easily soften out those brush strokes even more. So that's what I'm doing here. There's no paint loaded onto it at all. I'm just smoothing out those brush strokes with this soft brush. And the trick here, especially with the longer distances, is to go over the entire way. As you see that I'm not stopping in between, because then you get these little cut off marks and you still get a distracted feel to it. So I'm going from end to end. Again, very careful around here before moving on again further. Now, I did go a little bit too far there. You see this little lower corner of the kiss now has a dent, like it fell off a table or something. No worries, it's not in this video, but afterwards I just put one little bit of paint on there to cover that up. So you can always easily play around with your oils without having any fear. As long as you're gentle enough and you don't make too big of a screw up with huge brushes, it's easy to fix. Also here I'm slightly going over some of that white paint to give it a bit of a more glowy effect. I'm doing this again with a brush where no paint is loaded onto. We're reaching the end of this demonstration and tutorial, and I would like to thank you for sticking around like you did. Please be aware that a like and a subscribe really helps me to grow my channel and to be able to produce such videos more often. The last thing I'll show you is how I sign my paintings. That's with a stick, in this case a barbecue stick, just scratching out my name in the still wet paint. Easy peasy. Thanks for watching and happy painting!